So the big question is this: how do passionate golfers like you and I develop a stock shot day in and day out? A stock shot that's as reliable as the sun coming up in the morning. That's the question, and this podcast is the answer. Welcome to Stock Shot Secrets. All right, let's not waste any more time, because the fact of the matter is there is 6 things that I think that you think are true about golf, and they are complete lies and are absolutely destroying your game. And I hear these things all the time, and I got to clear the noise. I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant. I apologize, but I got to clear the air because this stuff is ruining your game. Now, the first one, right, is that when I hear players and like chunking shots and amateurs come into the golf room and they're taking lessons or online at the golf room everywhere and they're sending videos and we're typing, we're texting, we're talking to all these people, right? Or like if you look at like we have a golf swing analysis group on Facebook with like 150,000 people sending in videos. And you look at them and they're like, I keep swaying in my downswing. Like, how do I not sway? And I'm like, what are you talking about, man? Like, you have to sway. So first, what do we mean by swaying? Now, there is an idea on amateur golfers is that you are supposed to spin like in a barrel, meaning if you were to have your belt doesn't move. But the truth is that's not true. That doesn't happen, and it definitely does move. So to clear the air of what actually is truth, if you were to talk about swaying and what you should do for your sway, if you were to take your belt in my hand, if you're watching on YouTube or Instagram or whatever, and this was my belt, in my setup, right, my belt is at 0. As I move to my backswing, right, my belt, my pelvis will move -1 inch away from the target. And that is when my left arm is parallel to the ground. As I enter the top of my swing, my pelvis then recenters back to 0. So in my backswing, for all intents and purposes, you're just turning. There is a little bit of a pressure shift, but you are just turning, and we don't want to sway in the backswing, right? There is a little sway, but for all intents and purposes, we'll say don't sway. But the downswing is a massive sway. So when we're transitioning, we are moving our sway, our pelvis, our belt, we are moving it 5 inches towards the target into impact. That's a lot, right? Like, that's a big amount. So when you're saying, oh, like I swayed off the ball, or like, which would be the backswing, that would be true. But if I chunked it, and meaning like I didn't sway, that's just not true. Like, we have to sway. And the biggest swayer right now in the downswing, like, and maybe of all time, Scotty Scheffler. That dude sways 9 inches. He transitions and shifts 9 inches in his downswing, so he is a massive swayer. Now, the second misconception that's out there is to keep your head down. I remember a girl, her name was Trinity. She came into our academy. It was the first day she was there, and she was doing her combine. She's like 15 years old, 16 years old at the time, and she's making swing, and she's literally trying to keep her head down for the whole swing all the way into her finish. And I let her do it because we don't want to give her any coaching that time, just to get her assessment. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, my dad told me to keep my head down, or my coach. I'm like, no, that's just not true. Why? Because when we get halfway down and our hands essentially start to like get right here to our trail thigh, what happens is our body, our pelvis, our chest, everything starts to move up and around. And if it's moving up, my head can't stay down, because the club works in opposing angles. So like when the grip goes up, the club goes down because it's a stick, right? So if the grip keeps staying down and I keep my head down, then I'm going to hit it terrible. That's what happened with Charles Barkley. If any of you guys can think about Charles Barkley and his swing, what happened is he basically would make his head go real low, tons of lag, and he would never pull up and release it. So he was the ultimate keep your head downer, right? We don't want to do that, right? Because it's just not true. So when you hit a bad shot, right, or a bad chip or whatever, it's not because you lifted your head. That's just not true. The only time that actually is true is in putting. In putting, we do want to keep our head down and super, super still. Now, the third one that we want to talk about is the old saying back in the day of drive for show and putt for dough. And the truth is that if you look at the stats, driving is what I think maybe one of the top 2 most important parts of the game. Your driver makes or breaks your round, right? Like, it's really, really hard to play your best golf if you're hitting it in the trees off the tee. Like, not saying it's not possible, right? Like, Phil Mickelson almost won a U.S. Open at Winged Foot, and I think he legitimately hit like 1 fairway for the week. But his average proximity and chipping that week was like 2 feet. It was insane. So, could you play and play good with hitting your driver poorly? Yeah. Is it way harder? Absolutely. So the truth is that if you look at driving and you look at money made on tour, right? And this is a few years back. It wasn't last year. I don't have the latest stats, but the stat nonetheless will like hold true, right? For what we're trying to say here is, what do you think the top 5 players in driving accuracy made on the PGA Tour? And the answer is like just over $4 million in combined earnings. And then if you look at the top 5 drivers in driving performance, what did they make in earnings? And it was like $28 million. So if you hit your driver far and you hit it straight, guess what? You make a lot of money and you play really good. So driver is really important, right? So like, it kind of like putting is important, but like it's not as important. I would say putting is the one that, like, if your putter is really on, it allows you to go super low, but it's not necessarily the thing that is going to make you consistent day in and day out. Having a very good driver, and what I would also say, what I think is the most important stat, is greens in regulation, like, and proximity of the hole. Like, the more greens you hit, if you're hitting 15 greens around, it's really hard to suck, right? So hitting greens is paramount to being very, very consistent. Hey guys, I hope you are enjoying this episode of the Stock Shot Secrets podcast. If you are enjoying it, be sure to like this episode. Be sure to subscribe so you can always see when they're coming out. And most importantly, if you would be so kind to be able to share this podcast with other passionate golfers who are trying to get better and build stock shots, because it grows through you sharing it. Thank you so much for tuning in. And now back to Stock Shot Secrets. Now, the next part that we want to talk about is the idea of players saying, my swing is gone, right? You go to the range, you go to the first hole or the second hole, you're like, where'd my swing go? I just hit it great. Like, where'd it go? I must have left me, right? Your swing didn't change, man. It's the same. It's the same as it was yesterday. It's the same as it was a couple of days ago. It's the same as it was last week, right? But the only thing that does change is you change. So you are different from the range than you are on the golf course. So the question then begs to ask, what changed in you? Well, now you're on the course and there's consequence. So what happens is, because there's now consequence, there is now tension in your body, and therefore what really changed wasn't your swing, it was the timing of your swing. See, golf pro or tour players, right, have inconsistent swings, but they have made their inconsistent swings perfectly consistent. What do I mean? I mean that Jim Furyk has an inconsistent swing. If you looked at Jim Furyk and the loop that he has in his swing, right, it's not what you would put necessarily in a book. But what he did is he made the timing and the rhythm and the sequencing and the tempo of his inconsistent swing perfectly consistent. So he made the same inconsistencies the same time every time, if that makes sense, right? So that begs to say is, like, when you go out to the golf course and you're hitting it great on the range, and then you go to the course and you seem to be hitting it bad, your swing didn't leave. You just need to take a self-check and you go, where am I at right now? Like, where is my rhythm, tempo, and balance? And chances are it's probably different, which is why you are hitting it different. Now, the next one is the old adage of you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? We get that a lot with players that are coming into the golf room for the first time, or maybe at the golf room everywhere, and they're like, you just can't teach this old dog new tricks. Must swings, must swing. And it's like, that's just not true. The problem is that the way that you have trained has been the improper way to train like anything in your life, right? So the way that they have tried to train is wrong. And this is not like a Kyle Morrisism, this is just the facts. Feedback training trains your brain faster than anything else that there is out there under the sun, right? So when you use cones and noodles and shafts and all of these things, what ends up happening is you start to miss the obstacles. And like in your brain, what ends up happening is when you do that and you miss the obstacle, it doesn't have to be at full speed, and you miss the obstacle and you do a perfect rep, and then you do 60 perfect reps, a new circuit is formed inside your brain. So now that new circuit needs to be wrapped with this coating that's called myelin. And myelin is actually the muscle memory. It's not actually muscle. It's like a fatty tissue that stores memory, but that's the muscle memory. So what ends up happening is the circuit ends up getting wrapped with this myelin. And when that circuit has myelin that's thicker than the old myelin, that myelin starts to take over, and that's the new memory, the new program. But that takes time. And what happens and why the old dog can't learn new tricks is because they don't give enough time, meaning to store that myelin. They do it for like 5 minutes and they think it works, or it doesn't work. It's like, no. Like you have to build the myelin, which is like 60 reps, right? That creates the circuit. And then you got to keep practicing with perfect reps and then wrap that thing with the myelin. And then now that new memory starts to take shape. And then that's how your swing changes. And I know that it changes because we're doing it for tens of thousands of people around the world. And I've seen their swings change. And their swings change when they have an understanding of what they need to do, and they use feedback practice to practice, because now they're training the proper motor pattern and they store the right myelin. When you go out to the range and you're hitting golf balls, you're just a golf ball whacker guy. If you're not actually practicing the swing that you want the myelin to be stored in, you're just building more myelin in the crap swing. You need to build myelin in the swing that you ultimately want and desire, which is why there really is something to be said about perfect practice makes perfect. You want to, in your block practice, be practicing perfectly, so therefore you are storing the correct myelin. Now, the last one, and I've talked about this a little bit in the past, is the whole adage of putting and short game of I decelerated. Oh, I left it short because I decelerated. I chunked a chip because I decelerated. No, you didn't, right? You can't decelerate. When the club goes back, and whether it's a chip or a putt, the club essentially stops, and then it falls. You can't decelerate, right, a stopped object. The club, when it drops, is accelerating as it reaches the bottom of the arc. And if we're going to get back into our high school physics class, right, it's falling, and I think, 9.8 meters per second squared until it reaches terminal velocity, right? So it's falling, and it's accelerating while it's falling. Now, not to get overly technical, there is something to be called declining acceleration, which means it's accelerating just at a slower rate, which is actually what you want. So when I drop the putter, it's right when I drop it, it has its highest rate of acceleration. And then as it continues to fall, it's accelerating, but it's accelerating at a slower rate than it did right at the start. Just like a car accelerates faster when it goes 0 to 40 compared to when it goes 120 miles an hour to 140. It's still accelerating. It's just accelerating at a slower rate than it originally did. So what happens with amateur golfers is they take it back very, very short, and then they accelerate and push the golf ball. And that's why you see real high finishes and follow throughs that are longer than backswings. So the truth is that you can't actually decelerate. What's happening when you decelerate is actually two things are happening. One, chances are your backswing is too short. And second is that your grip pressure is changing. So if you are one of those golfers that feels like you constantly, quote unquote, decelerate, what I want you to pay attention to is the amount of pressure that you are imparting onto the grip. And what you would notice is that if you start with a 5 out of 10, as you go back, you'll notice that it tightens to like an 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, and it doesn't stay consistent. We want your grip pressure, whether it is a 3 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10, doesn't really matter, but it needs to stay consistent through the entire short game shot, because that allows for the energy of the club to be put onto the golf ball the most efficient way possible. So I wanted to clear the air with this to make sure that you understood that some of these things that come out of golfers' mouth, like I decelerated, where must we go? Right? I sway too much, or keep your head down. Those things are just not true, and now you know the truth. So don't say them. If I say them, I'm coming for you. All right? Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you guys back here for another episode. Hey, thank you so much for listening to the latest episode of Stock Shot Secrets. I would love to invite you to Columbus to come see me and hang out with me and build a personalized plan for you and your game. If you would want more information about building your personalized plan and coming to Columbus and hanging out, just email us at info@thegolfroom.com and we will get back to you and set your visit for an epic red carpet experience at TGR in Columbus, Ohio.